There are example scripts in the source for you to run most of Postfix through it, should you like to do so. This is recommended. It does not come that way by default, however, so if you want to do that, then you can look at what's provided to help you figure out how. There are a few, but only very few, mandatory edits that you must make to the configuration files. There are two configuration files that you'll mostly have to deal with. They will be in etc Postfix. One of them is called main.cf, and one of them is called master.cf. Master.cf is used by the Postfix master daemon, which is called master, which is what monitors the rest of the Postfix processes. It starts up new processes, it kills them when they're too old, it makes sure everything stays running. Main.cf is where you do most of your configuration for, what's the name of my machine, who am I sending mail as, who am I receiving mail from. The parameters are set with equals and used with a $, sort of like a shell variable. My origin is one of the things you need to set. If you set it to be your host name, then it will send mail as user at your host name, like cme@panzer.consistent.org, that's this machine. If I set it, though, to be consistent.org, then it would send mail as cme@consistent.org. It depends on if you were trying to send mail from your local machine as if you were...
Is that similar to send mail to the masquerade function?
I believe so. I don't know very much about send mail because I learned Postfix, but...
Yes.
Okay, my destination is the other thing you want to set. This tells Postfix who it should be accepting mail for. You can set it as just your host name and local host at your domain, and that will accept mail only for this one computer. And if you add to that the entirety of the domain, then it will accept any mail sent to that domain, and that's if you have like a domain-wide mail server. So let's say we have a workstation that we're putting in a domain. It wants to be able to send mail. It wants to be able to receive mail for itself, but the domain-wide mail server should also receive mail for the entire domain. So we want Panzer here to take mail for panzer.consistent.org, but something else is going to take consistent.org's email. So on the workstation, you would set my origin equals my domain. And on the server, you would set the same thing, but also that the destination includes the domain as well as the local machine. I should note that the parameters I'm telling you to set here are the ones that you actually have to go in and change in the main.cf, because the default values are good for most circumstances. So I will be telling you the ones that need to be flipped. If you have a null sign, then you want your origin to be your domain, and you want to send your mail to a mail server somewhere, so that the server handles getting it where it wants to go. You set relay host, and if you set it to my domain, then that assumes that you have DNS service and that there's an MX record. And in the master.cf, you want to comment out the entry that runs an SMTP daemon that was listening for mail, and you want to comment out the local delivery agent because you're not accepting any mail yourself. You are assuming that the users will get it via POP or IMAP or something off the mail server. If you are inside an internet or a firewall, and the gateway is going to be feeding mail inside and out, then set my origin again. And once again, if there's internal DNS with an MX record, then use relay host equals my domain. Otherwise, you have to hard code the relay host to a specific machine name and disable DNS lookups. Otherwise, Postfix will be hunting for a DNS server that isn't there. Which doesn't disable it, it just slows things down. So if you want to do that and enable direct local delivery, so from my machine to some other machine without going through the firewall and relaying through mail servers and things like that, then you need to set up a separate file, which is called Postfix transport. These are your transport maps. Postfix does a lot of things that SendMail would do in its sendmail.cs with extra maps and files that you can load optionally if you decide you need them. Set my.domain to SMTP, so that means anything here, send it by SMTP. .my.domain. The second entry on the list, sorry, I'm double talking, you also need to set to SMTP. And then you need to special case your own name and localhost, because otherwise Postfix will complain that you're looping mail. And you don't want that to happen. It makes your Postfix upset, it makes your system administrators upset. Like that. And then in main.cf, you need to add a reference to this transport map you've just created, so that Postfix will know that it has to look at this outside file. It doesn't need to do that by default because default setup is very simple. Okay, so if you've got your machine's happily trading mail behind the firewall needs some sort of setup so that it can handle the mail coming in and going out. You need to set up a transport map again to deliver mail to the relevant internal machines, maybe one or more. So you could have, Courtney's mail goes to Panzer, Jeff's mail goes to Jeff's machine, or you could have all of the mail go to the mail server. And you modify this line as is appropriate. That's SMTP : and then whatever machine you want it to go to. So if you want to allow local machines to send mail anywhere, to any machine, but you want machines outside your firewall to only be able to send to user@domain and not user@machine.domain, then you need this complicated looking bit of stuff. This is all in the main.cf. You set origin, destination, transport maps, because you're calling the line we just talked about above. You need to tell it what networks it considers good, trusted, and local. That's what the My Networks line does. Tell it who us is, and anyone who isn't us is them. And the next line, the SMTP recipient restrictions, permit My Networks, that means let them do whatever they want, of course, and reject everybody else. And for local transport, we're going to return an error because we're not delivering mail to ourselves on the gateway. We're delivering mail to either a mail server or to individual machines. So, if you've got a machine and you've got dial-up, I'm sorry. So let's say, dial-up, you're probably not connected all the time because some of the time you might be using that for a phone. So you don't want Postfix to be trying to tell your PPP daemon, okay, let's dial up. Every time you send an email, you want a batch process, probably, so that you can send everything all at once and not be dialing up 15 times a day. So what you need to do is set the relay host again, so that when you do dial up, the mail gets sent off to your ISP's mail server, which then deals with delivery, so that you don't have to be logged in until all your messages are delivered. And to keep Postfix from dialing you up, then you want defer transports equals SMTP. So that means save my SMTP transports, don't send them all the time. And then you want to add commands to your PPP or split dial-up scripts to cause the queue to be manually cleared when you dial up. And I will talk about what those are in a little bit, but basically you just want to say flush the queue and keep trying until you find all the messages. Okay, so some configuration odds and ends. Postfix, by default, is sort of annoying, fills your logs with some confusing messages. It tries every time it receives a message to send a notification to any BIF clients that might be listening saying, you got mail. And if there's no good clients listening, and there's no ComSat service running in inetd, and I don't know much about the ComSat service, but that's what Postfix is trying to talk to, it will then send to your syslog, I couldn't tell anybody they got mail. And it will do this constantly. So to keep that from happening in main.cf, all you have to do is put diff equals no. And it will stop trying to notify anybody, and you will stop getting error messages. No logs for that. The other thing it will do by default is check for NIS maps, Network Information Services, every so often. You get a lot of ugly, can't find NIS messages in your logs, which, if you don't have NIS, you don't care. So you set alias maps equals alias database, which is sort of, that's what I'm looking for. It's sort of cryptic on the surface of it. But basically, you're telling Postfix that the only maps you should be looking for are the ones that are local to this machine. So don't look for NIS. We haven't got any NIS. I've given you the entire list of things you should look for, and don't look for anything else. And by default, Postfix will accept mail for pretty much anybody, because it doesn't check immediately whether or not that person actually has an account on your machine. Because there are little separate bits of Postfix, so you have to tell a couple of bits of Postfix to do things if you want that checked. To cause Postfix check, then you set the local recipient maps variable, and you set it to alias maps, which is probably your aliases, and whoever's in your password file. If you've got Postfix chrooted on some systems, this will require a copy of your password file to be in the chroot jail. You have to try it and see what your system requires. Okay, so let's say, this is a fairly common thing you want to do, you want to send mail as user@domain, for the most part, but you also want some users to receive mail. Like, you want root sent to this machine, you don't want it sent to the mail server and then sent back to you. So set my origin as above, and then you need to set up virtual maps, which is sort of like the transport maps we talked about earlier. And etc postfix virtual is the file you want. In that file, then you put who's going to receive mail locally. So root, and where it goes, root at localhost, and postmaster probably, and anybody else you want to as well. And this will keep your root email from, your syslogs from being sent off to some mail server somewhere, so that you can then take it back both times across an insecure network. Postfix commands. Postfix commands are, for the most part, pretty simple and intuitive. It's great. Postfix start tells it to run. Postfix stop tells it to stop. Isn't that great? Postfix reload tells it to reload main.cf and master.cf. Postfix flush flushes the mail queue. This is the sort of thing you want to have in your PPP script. There is an example of script in the Postfix stack on the website if you are interested in such a thing. Mail queue works like it does with sendmail and tells you what's in the mail queue right now. It's just assembling. When the sendmail binary is called as mail queue, that's what it returns. New aliases. You probably all know about new aliases. You have to run it for Postfix just like you have to run it for sendmail. Postmap, and then the name of the map file will reload what's in the map. So that's what you have to do when you change etc postfix transport, etc postfix virtual. I think those are the only external maps that Postfix is running now. So Postfix reload will not reload the map files automatically. You also have to run postmap map file. If you type postconf and then there's bunches of options for it, man postconf if you're interested, you can find out some interesting things about the internals of your Postfix system while it's running. Things like what it's configured to send where and what version you have. What it thinks it's doing right now. Okay, the internals of Postfix. Postfix is, as I said before, not one executable, it's many little executables. Each of the executables inside Postfix has a single task that it performs. it performs it a configurable number of times, and then is killed, and a new instance is started up. This is to